friend we have in Jesus.
Hello and welcome again to this week's midweek message from Brixworth Community Church. Just a short pause for thought that hopefully may prove illuminating or otherwise for you for the rest of the week. And as I was thinking about what to say, the name of Bernard Cribbins came to mind. Now some of you may, particularly if you're young, will say, Bernard Cribbins, who the heck is that? Some of you older ones, if I may use the term older, may remember Bernard from, he's been going quite a few years now, in the early Carry On films, and Jack and Nori on quite a number of films and plays, and particularly in later years he's been in the Doctor Who series. And very multi-talented man. And one of the talents that he thought he had, and is again going back a few years, he decided to make some records. And the most famous one probably being one called Right Said Fred. But the one before that was a record entitled The Hole in the Ground. There was I digging this hole in the ground, etc. And I happened to be playing it the other day, and then my thoughts went a bit deeper in that hole. And I started thinking about, well, not so much of a hole, but a pit. And of course, if we think of pits, we think of coal mines, don't we? You know, mines going down in the pits, which indicates such deep, deep holes. And if you're familiar with Tarzan films or jungle films, there will have probably been a scene where a lion or a tiger has fallen into a pit that had been covered to hide itself, and they tumble into this pit and scrabble trying to get out and finding it impossible because the walls are too steep. And people can fall into pits. There are two or three in the Bible, actually. There is Joseph, who, when his brothers who were jealous of him decided to get rid of him, they threw him into a pit before selling him into slavery. There's Jeremiah, who was thrown into a pit because the king and the authorities didn't like the message that he was preaching. And there was Daniel, the famous story of Daniel in the lion's den. Now, I would imagine that the lion's den was in fact actually a pit, quite deep down. So there are three people who physically found themselves in pits. But there is another meaning to the term pit. There's the emotional feelings that we use pits to describe. The pit of despair. Or perhaps an old-fashioned one now. Oh, life is the pits, isn't it? And these just indicating an emotional state of mind or situation. And again, the Bible gives us some illustrations there. There is David, the greatest king ever in Israel, who was chased by Saul in his early days and hunted like an outlaw. And he was obviously in the pit of despair. There's Jonah, who, if you and I were sitting in the middle of a big fish or whale's belly, I think we've been in a little bit of a pit of despair, wouldn't you? And of course there was Job. Well, if you want to know what it's like to be in the pits of despair, read the story of Job. But he had a good ending, but never mind about that. Now, you and I may not have experienced a physical pit, but I'm sure there are many of us, and myself included, who have from time to time experienced the emotional pit from which there appears to be no escape. And such situations can bring us into contact with people who produce a variety of responses to how we're feeling. And many of these responses are very well-meaning. And I found this, and I'll just share some of the responses that I found in this. This is called The Pit, and allow me to read it to you. A man fell into a pit and couldn't get himself out. A subjective person came along and said, I feel for you down there. An objective person came along and said, it's logical that someone would have fallen down there. A Pharisee, which was an old-fashioned religious leader, a Pharisee said, only bad people fall into pits. A news reporter wanted the exclusive story on his pit. Confucius, if you know who Confucius was, a religious leader, Confucius said, if you had listened to me, you would not have been in a pit. Buddha, another religious leader, said, "Your pit is only a state of mind." A realist said, "Phew, that's a pit." A scientist calculated the pressure necessary to get the man out of the pit. A geologist told him to appreciate the rock strata in the pit. The taxman asked him if he was paying for the pit. The council inspector asked if he had permit to dig the pit. An evasive person came along and avoided the subject of the pit altogether. A self-pitying person said, "You haven't seen anything until you see my pit." And a charismatic said, "Just confess that you're not in a pit." Jesus, seeing the man, took him by the hand and lifted him out of the pit. That's the crux of what I want to say today. There are two passages in the Bible I just want to share with you in closing. Jesus said this to his followers: "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And then in James, the book of James, just one short verse, and it says this: "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up." Now, I don't know what sort of state of mind you're in at the moment, what is going through your life. Hopefully it's a very pleasant life and you're very happy at the moment. But we're human beings, and sometimes we think life is the pits. And it's those times when there's faith in Jesus. He will come. If you reach out your hand, he will take your hand and lift you out of that pit. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. May God be with you. Bless you.
Take it to the Lord in prayer. In his arms he'll take and shield you. We will find a solace there.